Well, hello everyone, it's Nina. Welcome to this video where we're going to be doing some watercoloring and stamping using the Misty stamping tool. This is a collaboration with Neat and Tangled and My Sweet Petunia, which are the creators of the Misty stamping tool. Misty stands for Most Incredible Stamping Tool Invented, and we're going to be using this today to do some stamping that will be the base for our watercoloring later on. Here I've got some images from the new Neat and Tangled So Good to See You stamp set. This has a lot of really cute lilac and flower images that we're going to be using to do some watercoloring. I'm going to be using my Misty tool to stamp all these down. What's nice about the Misty is that it allows me to stamp a bunch of images all at once for something like a background like this, and really helps save some time on your stamping and keep you from having to use a bunch of little tiny blocks and stamp things one at a time. Now, I'm going to be rearranging these again to go ahead and continue my scene. This is another nice thing about the Misty tool is that you can move things around and kind of get a replacement in mind before you go ahead and commit to the placement of the images. So here I'm going to go ahead and lay these down, and then I'm going to bring the arm over and pick them up, and then I'll go ahead and use my ink once again to stamp them. I'm using antique linen distress ink because this is going to be watercoloring. I wanted something that would be light and be able to not be showing up in my watercoloring that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be using distress inks to do the watercoloring, and so it made sense to go ahead and use distress inks for this watercolor stamping. And once I've got that finished, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my watercoloring. I'm going to be using distress inks again, as I mentioned. I'm going to list all the colors that I'm using on the side of the screen in case you're interested in any of the color combinations. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the base coat for all of my images, and I'm going to go ahead and do that and play some music for you while you watch, and then I'll come back when we start the next step of the coloring process. Alright, so now it's time for the detail work for our coloring. I'm using some Seedless Preserves distress ink to go over top of my little lilacs here. This is a really beautiful warm purple, and when you apply it over top of the Victorian Velvet distress ink, it really adds a nice little tone to the coloring and blends the two together to create this nice warm purple. So I'm going to go ahead and blend this out. I'm using a silver black velvet round number 2 brush. This is a nice fine detailed point, and I love using this one for detailed work. Next, I'm going to bring in some crushed olive, and I'm going to go ahead and start adding some shading to my little leaves here. I'm not too worried about staying inside the lines because this is going to be an artistic style watercoloring. I wanted it to be able to have that organic feel, so any spots that go outside the lines, I'm really not too worried about it. Now I'm going to use some Stormy Sky distress ink, and I'm going to go ahead and add this into the centers of my flowers. This works well for adding in that deep dark blue, which went nicely with the tumbled glass. Bringing back my fine tip brush once again, I'm using that same crushed olive color. I'm going to apply darker coloring over top of the detail portions of these leaves. Now you can skip this part if you like, but I really think adding these detail portions to your coloring really helps the image stand out a little bit and give it some nice detailing and contrast to the coloring. Now I'm bringing in more Seedless Preserves on top of these little lilacs. I'm adding this into the darkest areas where the shadows would be on these flowers. Because again, this is going to be an artistic style stamping, I'm not getting too detailed with everything, so just some general shading is good enough for this kind of an image. Now I'm bringing in some Heidi Swapp Gold Color Shine, and I love this gold color shine because it adds such a really nice warm feel to the paper and adds a little bit of shimmer and sparkle to the design without being too overpowering. Alright, so now we're doing a little bit more stamping. I've got a Hello stamp from the Painted Hello stamp set from Neat and Tangled. This is another new stamp in their January release. I'm going to stamp this with some Versamark ink onto some vellum, and I'm going to heat emboss this with gold embossing powder. This is another nice thing about the Misty is that you can get perfect placement with your sentiments, and especially if you were using a solid opaque ink such as black or something and you didn't stamp it all the way, you could go ahead and re-stamp this in the same exact spot and get a perfect placement, which you wouldn't be able to do as easily with clear blocks. So now I'm going to run this through my Big Shot machine using the coordinating die. You can stamp this with multiple layers. This is actually a layering stamp set, but I've only used the solid image, and that Hello die will actually cut out any of the shapes. I popped this up onto some clear foam tape, and I'm going to attach this down onto my card. I love this clear foam tape because it's nice and clear and you can't see it through the vellum. Now I felt this needed an extra sentiment, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp another sentiment onto some black cardstock to create a banner. This is from the Happy Holidays stamp set. This is also from Neat and Tangled. And even though this is a holiday stamp set, it has some sentiments in there that you can use year-round. So I'm going to emboss this with some white embossing powder, so then my sentiment will end up reading Hello from me to you. I'm going to trim this sentiment banner down, and I'm going to go ahead and attach it to my card base. I also used some scattered straw distress ink to go ahead and add some color along the edges of where the flower clusters are, because I felt it needed a little bit more extra pop of color to brighten things up. So I'll go ahead and trim that off, and then finally I'm going to take some clear sequins and I'm going to glue these down onto my card. I'm going to be using PPA matte adhesive. This is a really nice clear adhesive that's in a matte finish. And what I really like about it is that it has a really strong hold, so anything that you've used this with, buttons, sequins, or other embellishments, they aren't going to come off in the mail. And I really love having a glue like that because it's really handy to have something that's not going to give you any trouble when you're going ahead and putting these kinds of things through the mail. So that's going to do it. I hope you've enjoyed. Be sure to stop over at my blog where you can get more information on this card, including the products used. If you've also enjoyed, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.